Hi, so you probably haven't seen my face for a very long time, but I will be doing the response history to Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. Midnight's Children is Salman Rushdie's second novel, and one which ultimately led to his widespread fame, but also seemingly predicted his later blasphemy. The novel came out in 1981 and thus had a 34-year response history. Edward Champion notes that there are three essential responses to Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children that placate the 21st century. Literary person 1. Oh, that's great! The grudging tone, recalling something distasteful, as if one is supposed to like the book rather than genuinely like it. Efforts to press literary person 1 on the subject prove fruitless. Literary person 2. I read that in my early 20s. It's the opening paragraph she likes, although she agrees with me that Lolita's opening is better. Have you reread it? No. Would you? No. Literary person 3. Oh, Rushdie. Do you like him? Do you know him? What's wrong with Rushdie? Let's just say I'd rather read Nepal. You and me both. In an interview conducted in 1983, published in Turnstile, Salman Rushdie notes of his initial audience. The people who like the book most are young. That's obviously a simplification, but it's interesting that very large numbers of people who came to meet me or hear my talks were very young. They were all Salim's generation or younger, and I like that. I feel that it was right that the people who were the essential subject in the book had taken it for themselves and made it their own. Endless numbers of people, not just in Bombay, who would come up to me and say, "You shouldn't have written this book. We know all of this stuff. We could have written this book." And I thought that was an extraordinary thing for a writer to be told. Much the biggest compliment anyone has ever paid me. The older generation, I suspect, were often shocked by it. This corresponds well with the earlier commentary on the book by Clark Basil in his article in the New York Times on April 19th of 1981 entitled A Novel of India's Coming of Age, in which Basil states, "If I am to do more than describe my pleasure in this book, if I am to surmise and interpret, I would have to start by saying that Midnight's Children is about the narrator's growing up in Bombay between 1947 and 1977, and about the 32 years of his grandparents and parents' lives before that. It is also a novel of India's growing up, from its special, gifted infancy to its very ordinary, drained adulthood." Basil compares Rushdie's novels to other magical realists, but does not refer to them as such. He compares Rushdie twice to Gabriel Garcia Marquez as well as Günter Grass, suggesting that both Marquez and Grass made the aggrandizement of the ordinary objects and things much easier than Rushdie, stating that this is not necessarily Rushdie's fault, but rather that the history of India proves less easy of a surface than Latin America and Germany. It was only a year later, in 1984, that Prime Minister Indira Gandhi brought actions against the book in the British courts. She claimed to have been defamed by a single sentence Rushdie placed in chapter 28 of Midnight's Children, in which her son, Sanya Gandhi, is said to have had a hold over his mother, and by accusing her of contributing to his father Feroz Gandhi's death through her neglect. When Salman Rushdie agreed to remove the offensive sentence, however, the case was settled out of court. Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children was perhaps also heavily supported by the infamy of his later work, The Satanic Verses. His novel stands as a centerpiece of post-colonial studies to the extent that one cannot view post-colonial studies without thinking of Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children. As noted by Rukmini Bahaya Nair, a contemporary mythos of post-coloniality has coalesced in the last decade or so around the devilish figure of Salman Rushdie. Rushdie serving here as essential of a figure as Fanon. The novel, despite the flattery and its now canonical status as a representative of India, is, however, subject to challenge because of its choice to take up the language of the colonizer. Harish Trinity, for instance, questions how Western critics can view Salman Rushdie as having either invented India or provided it with a voice, pointing out how ignorant Rushdie is of Hindu Urdu or Hinduism or even of the Bombay cinema. Richard Cronin going so far as to argue that his humorous attempts to encapsulate the India illustrate his status as an outsider, who not only thinks in English but also behaves in the same manner as an Englishman, resembling more closely someone such as Rudyard Kipling rather than an Indian writer. Neoted Tenkortenar in Self-Nation text in Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, going so far as to claim that all of his later works were exemplifications, with the exception of the Satanic Verse, were attempts to return to home or to return to the former Midnight Children, and as a result he compared all of the later works to it, they all becoming attempts at returning to what he himself refers to as imaginary homelands, or is referred to in post-colonial studies as imagined communities. In 2000 he still notes, "I want to get back to India," dreaming much like Dante of a glorious return home, while he knows that to cross a frontier is to be transformed, a frontier which he crossed within his exile, but of his exile he learned, perhaps this is what it means to love a country, that its shape is also yours, the shape of the way you think and feel and dream, that you can never really leave. And this home is not only non-existent, but also never existed. In the late 1990s, the BBC was intending to film a 5-part miniseries of Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, with Rahul Bose as the lead, but as a result of pressure from Muslim community in Sri Lanka, the filming permit was revoked and the project was cancelled. Rushdie was later involved in a stage adaptation of Midnight Children by the Royal Shakespeare Company in 2003. He actually provided a 1-hour-long interview regarding his association with the Royal Shakespeare Company in this production. I will provide a link for you all to watch it, but it's over an hour long, so I don't think we'll have time for it now. In 2012, Midnight Children, the novel, was, however, adapted to film, and unlike in the earlier 1990s attempt, this one was successful. Here is a clip of the trailer.